Longer viewfinder NATO rail arrived. Curious to see if it makes the camera a bit more comfortable on the shoulder. If they knew it were compatible with a Burano, the price would be an additional $0. But looks like, yeah, adds an inch. I do wish they made one that were 2 inches longer, 8 inches overall. The Sony is thicker. Looks like it's double-sided. I hope it fits. Yeah, it's a good fit. At full extension, it's just the right distance to line up on my shoulder with the Movcam shoulder pad, which is not sliding, but you can position it in a few different locations with the tie-down screws. Maybe I look into getting a different top handle or getting a 15 mil clamp that goes on the front of the handle, because that would get me another about an inch. I'm gonna look into that. In last week's vlog, the shoot up in Dallas, 2-camera, single-person interviews, the B-angle, the client had requested a slider, motorized, slow movement. I ordered this slider. I'll put a link in the description. It's the NEEWER. This is at maximum speed. It didn't come in time. It was supposed to show up 3 days before the shoot, and every day I got the Amazon update that it was delayed by a day, and it showed up the evening of the shoot day. So actually made our shoot day a little easier. Producers were okay shooting the second angle on a tripod. I did offer to run a manual slider, but they had experience in the past where a 45-minute long interview with no cuts or interruption, and the slider speed is too inconsistent on a manual. So that's totally understandable. So this thing's pretty good for what it does. Ultimately, I think I will update my Ronin to the RS3 or 4 and use the auto composition feature, because while you can get this set up with the pan compensation to hold the desired interview composition, the subjects always shift and the headroom changes. They lean forward, they sit back, they get taller. This happened in Dallas with those interviews. I got everything lined up. First few questions, compositions were great, and then both our subjects grew. Second guy, as we got towards the end, he was leaning forward quite a bit. So in each case, I got to jump out there and adjust the height of the boom mic. But this slider, I mean, I guess I just would have missed part of a response on the B angle, because you got to park it, adjust the framing, tilt a little bit, and restart. But at any rate, I think with the Ronin on there, with a flat base, and I want to power everything off a gold mount battery, I think I'm going to mount a gold mount plate to this slider in an upcoming video. And also, it's got a ball head right now that came with it. I mean, this thing was like $350. Great value. And I can run it on a Sackler 20 with no sagging, just the touch and go plate. It does droop just a little bit, but I'm not seeing it in the composition. But I think I'm going to also buy just an inexpensive pan and tilt head that's 1/4 inch threaded base instead of the ball head. Been putting off some equipment maintenance. First up, the cabinet I made for my rock and roller carts. Made it with pocket screws, and the cabinet, I didn't use enough fasteners to secure it to the van. So with the stinger stacked on the right, it's been drifting to the left. And when I was packing up on a shoot, I just put my hands on the right-hand side of the cabinet and tried to push it back into place, and I ripped all the pocket screws out. I've got some leftover plywood here. I think what I'm going to do is rip just a couple of narrow strips of ply and make that as a lip fastened in here, and I'll put new pocket screws in the lip. I'll only need to remove the items that are inside the little cabinet, the sandbags and the carts, and maybe the few cases on top, versus having to pull out the right-hand half of the gear that's in the van. Get moderate woodworking skill improvements with each project, but here's where I went wrong on this box. I put the top shelf on the inside instead of sitting on top, so all of the load was on the pocket screws. Like, I should have had the top shelf sit on top of the ply, because I have this upper cabinet that has its load transfer to this shelf, which is holding some stands and camping chairs and flag kits. So I get those in place. This is a little bit more problematic because it's really tight. The wheels, I don't have that much clearance, like maybe a 1/2 inch total. So now I got about a 1/4 inch clearance on the sides with the big tires on the bigger rock and roller. And then I've got 1/2-inch ply decking in the van, so I screwed the cabinet directly into the decking. I really need to countersink these, but I need like a 3/4 inch screw. These are 1 inch. So these are inside the rails for the cart, so hopefully they don't bind up. All right, switched out the screws. These are better. Countersunk, flush. The 12-volt rooftop air conditioner has been on the van for a couple of months now, and I have yet to spend a night in the van with the AC running. I had one overnight in West Texas where there were no hotels, but it was cool enough that I didn't need it. August is a little slow. My memory is historically, it's a slow month. It was a holiday week this week, and I don't have any work until next week. So I went back and looked at some revenue just to see if my memory is accurate with actual history of a slow month in August. So you look here, 2024. This is revenue accrual basis. Sometimes I'm diligent about getting an invoice generated the morning after a shoot wraps. Sometimes they get in the system the day or a week before the shoot. And other times when I get projects stacked up, it can take me 2, 3, even 4 weeks to generate an invoice. But over the course of the year, it probably evens out. But like looking here where March was super busy, it may have been that, a good amount of that March work was in February, and I was diligent about getting all of March and February work billed in March. And then April, well, I will say April's always slow historically, and August is my other slow month, with the exception being when I was shooting mostly commercial work. August was slamming busy. Late July, August, September, very busy for the back to school and then holiday consumer product buying season. So let's jump back a layer and look at the past 3 years of accrual basis. I had it in my head before I ran this report that 2024 was a bigger year than the past 2 years. Year to date through the end of August, not the case. So 2022, I got to go back and look through my calendar, but say that's like an eighth more revenue approximately year to date. And maybe 22 slowed down towards end of year, and this year it'll speed up and even out those bars. Last year was a little light. I did make more of an effort. So I moved to Texas Q3 of 2020, particularly 2021 and 2022. I still had a lot of legacy long-term clients back in California. So I was traveling back there quite a bit to work in California as I was ramping up here in Texas. And then in 2023, the border coverage had really ramped up for me locally or regionally here in Texas. So I didn't need to fill my calendar with work back in California. So I made the conscious effort to travel less in 23, and that directly resulted in less revenue, but I had a whole lot more free time to spend with my family and get fit. And this year, a little bit bigger revenue than last year. But like I said, had you asked me before this chart, I thought for sure 24 was a bigger year than 22. All right, let's step back another layer. Comparing 2014, 15, and 16. Only reason I picked those 3 years is I remember 16 being a phenomenal year. It shot mostly commercials in 2016. And it was a year in my memory where it's like every inquiry and booking just fell into place with very few conflicts. It was good. I was steadily working, rarely had to decline on a project because I was already held or booked with somebody else. It's just like everything Tetris together beautifully. And I had quite a bit of free time. We spent a lot of time out weekends and extended weekdays out at Catalina Island in 2016. That was a great year. But surprised too here to see that 15 was a bigger year than 16. 14, I don't remember. I got to go look at the calendar to spark my memory. I don't really remember what I was working on back then. I had one marquee client on an annual contract where we were in production every month, and I think it was like 10 production months a year. So we'd have 2 months where we were dark. Then 22, 23, 24. Now, none of this is inflation adjusted. These are actual numbers. I want to do that too, although it's pretty depressing if I use the U.S. federal government's Bureau of Labor Statistics inflation index calculator, which they totally lie and pad to cater to making the federal government doing like they're doing a good thing with the economy, but they constantly manipulate and change that formula. And just looking at the food index, it's super obvious that, right now, the inflationary cycle we're in, the actual cost of housing and food are significantly higher than what the BLS indicates. But even so, using the BLS numbers adjusted for inflation, my peak earning decade was in my 30s. I'm now 46. I'll be 47 in January. Now, I was grinding a lot harder in my 30s than I'm willing to do now in my 40s. Just, financially stable now. I want to be around with my family more. It's a priority for me to stay in the gym and stay fit, where I could eat poorly in my 30s and work out intermittently and still get by. But man, now if I'm not working out minimum 2, 3, 4 days a week, those shoot days destroy me. I feel like I am far more physically fit now in my 40s. I'm heavier. I've got more muscle mass than at any other point in my life. But man, the recovery time is a real thing. Like, we did that shoot last week up in Dallas, travel day up, one shoot day, and it was a short day, and we drove home in the afternoon. I think I got home at like 10 or 10:30 in the evening. That was with a stop for dinner. It's like a 4.5. There was traffic, actually. I think it was closer to a 6-hour drive. But at any rate, I basically was down and out for 2 days recovering after that shoot last week. I had it off, so it was like sleep in the morning, get up between 7:30, 8 a.m. I go to the gym and weight train for an hour, 10 a.m. to 11, get something to eat, then 11:30 to about 12:45, jiu-jitsu. And then each day last week after that, I got home and I would take a nap for like 1 to 2.5 hours. That didn't beat me up like that in my 30s, I guess is what I'm saying. But at any rate, not inflation adjusted. I'm not producing as big a numbers as I was 8 years ago. And I got to remind myself, this is January through August 31. This is not the entire year. We still have 4 months to go on the numbers. So a lot can happen in 4 months. It's more than a quarter. So now let's look at 22, 23, 24 revenue by month. Studying here, most of the months, 22 was higher. But a couple semi-consistencies. April is slower. August is slower. Got a big spike April 22. That is because I worked the entire month covering news on the border, national news coverage, live shots, overtime on some of the days. And then this is gross total revenue, not profit or distribution. So, I have some operating expenses in there. Like this doesn't account for things like hotel rooms, equipment, insurance costs, monthly operating costs, any CapEx I do to buy new gear. This is all top line. All right, this one's getting harder to read, but 14, 15, 16 versus 22, 23, 24 revenue by month. So 14 was pretty steady the first half of the year, and then picked up late in the year. Like I said, like in that decade of my career, I was doing mostly commercial work. I was doing a fair amount of corporate too, though, in 14. But yeah, things ramp up in the second half of the year for commercial. That's just always been my experience. Like January, February, March, trade show season, corporate conferences. Summers is a random mix of a little bit of everything. And then second half, I'm like football, broadcast sports, and commercial work. All right, this is discouraging, but it's also reality and a reason why you got to kind of pivot, reinvent, find a second income stream and a third income stream. But when my first year full-time in production was 1998, and I was kind of like entry-level guy, but the day rates and annual incomes of people in production, once you were in, there were much higher barriers to entry, but once you were in, inflation adjusted, making quite a bit more income. And I look back to like my mentors, people in their 40s, 50s, early 60s during that period of my career, late 90s, early 2000s, like the ones that were really excelling, like owned second homes, they had a boat, a couple of them had their own airplanes, and like people doing what I'm doing now. And that is, except for it's more and more rare to find a DP that's got their own airplane. I mean, they're out there, but it seemed to me there were quite a bit more higher ratio, high income folks back then. There's a whole lot more jobs now, but it's all lower end stuff, just more volume. And when I first started out, it was if you were shooting video, you were spending about $125,000 for a camera and 2 zoom lenses, a beta cam with a standard zoom and a wide angle zoom. And then your light kit was the like Lowell hot lights.
And maybe if you were a broadcast shooter, you had a couple of Joker HMIs, and anything bigger than that, it went to a gaffer with a truck. But to get to the point where you could buy a camera and it was 125 grand, like you had to charge rates proportionally. I didn't own gear back then. I was renting gear when I would book a package rate DP gig, owner op gig. But I got to find them. I scanned them when I moved to Texas. I threw away the original paperwork, but I had invoices shooting Betacam for broadcast and high-end corporate, 98, 99, 2000, 2001, two-person crew, DP camera package, and what they called an A2. You're basically a Shure analog mixer, not double system record, boom pole, and 2 wireless lavs. And my mentors and people in that world, the DPs own the sound kit, and then they just had like a trainee in A2 they were training up, and you're paying them maybe 150 to 350 as a labor day rate back then based on their skill set and market demand. But the billables for me back then were 1,800 to about 2,000 a day for a 2-person crew was fairly standard, late 90s. And talking to older, again, my mentors in that Betacam space, they were telling me in the early 90s, it was $2,000 a day. So that full decade of inflation and rates did not change. And now I jump ahead 2024, most of the majority of the cold inquiries I get to hire me, if I quote them $2,000 for a 2-person crew, they scoff at that. Like, it's way too much money. I mean, I can still command that, but I talk with other shooters my age, like rates for what I'm doing now, what you see on my vlog, the dollar amounts are the same as early to mid 90s. It's crazy. But again, like the barrier entry is so low now. You can shoot on an FX30 for, what is it, $1,500? Like say $2,500, you got a basic kit that shoots broadcast quality or mid-range corporate level deliverables. Like you can do it. That was not an option back then. So yeah, I don't know. I'm curious how some of you that have been in the business as long as me, what are you doing to adapt? Have you seen the same decline in spending power from your income working in production? Like I said, like I'm not billing less than I was in the past, but rates have not tracked or expanded at a rate greater than inflation. Like I'm slipping a little bit below the waterline, a little bit more each year. All right, we'll leave this here for this week. Looking forward to chatting some more in the comments. And let me know what other data you'd like to see. I've got QuickBooks data from my business all the way back to 2006 I can pull from and look at these charts. I'm also finding I can, depending on different searches and criteria, it's easy to manipulate the data to some extent to tell the story I'm trying to tell. And that is not my intention. Anyway, thanks for watching.